Have you ever wondered what would happen if a group of struggling music students tried to make it big, while barely affording rent, dodging cranky professors, and surviving on pure talent, and maybe a little bit of luck? Well, that's exactly what Raising the Wind 1961 is all about. This charming British comedy takes us into the chaotic and often hilarious lives of 5 young musicians just trying to make ends meet. But what makes this film truly special? Stick around, and you'll see why it's still a hidden gem worth watching. Raising the Wind brings together some of the best British comedic actors of the time, including Leslie Phillips, Liz Fraser, Kenneth Williams, and the unmistakable James Robertson Justice. And with a setting as rich as the fictional London Academy of Music and the Arts, the film perfectly blends humour, classical music, and the everyday struggles of students trying to chase their dreams. Our story follows 5 music students: Mervyn, played by Leslie Phillips, Malcolm, Paul Massey, Alex, Jimmy Thompson, Miranda, Liz Fraser, and Jill, Jennifer Jane, who decide to move into a shared flat to cut costs and have a place to practice. Now, if you've ever lived with roommates, you already know that this can be a recipe for chaos. But throw in violins, trumpets, and an eccentric landlady, and you've got the perfect setup for comedy. Of course, no good film about music students would be complete without a terrifying professor.
Aren't you the young man who kicks bass drums about the building like footballs?
And Raising the Wind delivers with Sir Benjamin Boyd, played to perfection by James Robertson Justice. He's the kind of teacher who can reduce a student to tears with just a single look. Or worse, a sarcastic comment.
If we tried to get some of the right notes in the right places.
And then there's Harold, played by the legendary Kenneth Williams, a pompous know-it-all who is just as much a thorn in his classmates' sides as Sir Benjamin is.
Well, a girl's reach must always exceed her grasp, for what's a heaven for?
One of the film's most memorable subplots revolves around Mervyn, who, in a moment of drunken foolishness, sells a melody he composed to 2 advertising copywriters, Sid and Harry, played by the always hilarious Sid James and Lance Percival, for a mere £50.
It's not bad. It's not bad at all.
The next morning, reality hits hard. Not only has he likely breached the terms of his student grant, but he also realises that the tune isn't even his. It's actually an old waltz that had been floating around in his subconscious. The problem? Getting the tune back is now going to cost him £500.
Of course, it's going to cost a little more than that to buy it back, eh? 500 quid? Definitely.
Money he definitely doesn't have. Meanwhile, the group of students attempts to make some extra cash by performing at a recital. Sounds like a solid plan, right? Well, not quite. Their performance turns into an absolute disaster, with strings snapping, and then comes the big test. Literally. Some of the students compete for a prestigious scholarship, which involves conducting the Symphonia of London. Mervyn does a decent job, but it's Harold who steals the spotlight by annoying the orchestra so much with his constant criticism.
But what I was playing seemed to work in very well.
Killers, I'm still far from satisfied.
That they get revenge with a ridiculously fast performance of Rossini's William Tell Overture. If you've ever wanted to see an overconfident student get his comeuppance in spectacular fashion, this is it. In the end, the scholarship goes to Miranda, much to everyone's surprise. But in a final twist, she reveals that her true passion isn't conducting. It's marrying Mervyn, who, luckily, feels the same way.
But you didn't say anything.
You didn't say anything.
Meanwhile, Malcolm secures a permanent spot as a second trumpet in Sir Benjamin's orchestra and proposes to Jill. And as for Alex, he heads off to Amsterdam to study violin, proving that not all endings need to be romantic.
Fell through, he was certain I could get a grant to study fiddle under Goethe in Amsterdam.
So, how did Raising the Wind fare at the box office? Well, while it wasn't a massive blockbuster, it did well enough to cement itself as a solid entry in the British comedy scene of the early 60s. Critics praised its light-hearted humour and the performances of its cast, particularly James Robertson Justice's gruff but oddly endearing portrayal of Sir Benjamin.
Madam, must you make that noise?
And of course, it didn't hurt that the film featured a delightful mix of classical music and comedy, something that made it stand out from the usual fare of the time. Looking back, Raising the Wind is one of those films that perfectly captures the charm of its era. It's a must-watch for fans of classic British comedy, music lovers, or anyone who's ever struggled through student life. The humour still holds up, the characters are as memorable as ever, and the soundtrack, well, let's just say that if you weren't a fan of classical music before, this movie might just change your mind. So, have you seen Raising the Wind? If not, is it now on your watch list? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into classic films. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Well, that's handy, isn't it?